Saudações a todos os amigos, espero que estejam bem. Nessa entrevista do Alex Collier, realizada alguns meses atrás, ele e o Dr. Salla detalham as operações do estado profundo dentro e fora do planeta. Devido a restrições da plataforma, esse vídeo não pôde ser publicado na íntegra, mas pode ser assistido de forma gratuita na plataforma Rumble. Por esse mesmo motivo, não vou poder trazer todos os detalhes aqui, mas separei os dois principais tópicos dessa entrevista, pois trata-se de informações extremamente valiosas à nossa comunidade. São eles: quais foram os principais catalisadores do Grande Despertar e como se dará a queda do estado profundo. Para quem não conhece o Alex Collier, ele foi um dos primeiros contatados a revelar a existência de um programa espacial secreto dos Estados Unidos, isso ainda no início dos anos 90, e que esse programa secreto havia estabelecido colônias fora da Terra e até mesmo em outros sistemas estelares. Suas informações vieram de extraterrestres pertencentes ao Conselho de Andrômeda, uma organização de seres benevolentes de aparência humana dedicados à ciência, evolução da consciência e viagem no tempo, e que queriam impedir o surgimento de uma tirania galáctica no futuro, cujo início foi rastreado até a Terra dos dias atuais. Ou seja, o Alex Collier é uma das pessoas com mais experiência e respaldo para divulgar esse tipo de assunto. Vamos então à primeira parte. Quais foram os principais catalisadores do Grande Despertar? Logo no início, o Dr. Salla decorre sobre quais foram os principais catalisadores do Grande Despertar, citando os fatores exógenos, como por exemplo o cinturão de fótons, flashes solares, pulso galáctico, processo de ascensão de Gaia, etc. Mas que, na opinião dele, o principal fator foi o que a primeira eleição de Donald Trump e o início de postes da Operação Q trouxeram, ou seja, o sistema de chantagem estrutural em diversos ramos da sociedade, principalmente no meio político e de comunicação da mídia tradicional. Ele pergunta ao Alex se concorda com esses argumentos. Alex diz que sim, mas complementa com detalhes importantes. Vamos ver a explicação do Alex como foi essa parte.
About that. And yes, these groups have been around forever, and we can probably trace those back. The Book of Enoch is very, very good about this, talking about when the Anunnaki or the Nibiruans left, they left people here who were ordered to watch over us, but they didn't. They really didn't. They corrupted humanity and taught, I don't know what the right word is, science, magic, spells, whatever it is, that could be used for a positive or a negative. They taught us how to manipulate energy and call forth energy. And you have your dark magic and you have your white magic. For some reason, somehow the dark magic took over. They got control of the planet, and they created a monetary system in order to manipulate humanity, to enslave humanity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes on from there. And the behaviors that they exhibited were those that they saw their gods do, quote, extraterrestrials. Because we know that there were many wars using humans as the pawns on a chessboard. We know this to be a fact. And it's not only been here, it's been in other star systems as well. There's a history of that in our galaxy, especially in the Orion Empire, the Draconian Empire, and other smaller empires that have aligned themselves to that frequency, that dark magic frequency. Even Aldebaran, there have been some real serious issues there as well. The Pleiades went through a phase of that for a period of time, and they've gotten their act together. So they can relate. That's why they can relate so well to where we're at with our process. And so can the A's, because the A's weren't really involved in a lot of wars, but they were observing everything that was going on from their position, which is why they have a different perspective about everything, you know.
Ou seja, todo esse sistema de dominação global não começou agora. Vem de muitos milhares de anos atrás. E os grandes responsáveis foram os Anunnakis negativos, que estabeleceram suas linhagens dentro da família humana terrestre, através de poderes não só físicos, mas também de poderes extrafísicos. Mas a humanidade terrestre nunca aceitou em seu nível de alma esta dominação, e sempre lutou contra isto, inclusive causando grandes conflitos na época de Atlantis e Lemúria. Vamos ver um pouco a explicação sobre esse objetivo de alma ou grupos de almas.
But Mornay once said that souls incarnate into societies, and they would do it collectively, which means to me that they're drawn to specific types of social structures. And that's a huge piece of learning that every soul goes through. And it could be, we incarnate, some of us have incarnated into very controlling social structures, some of us more freedom structures. You know, I'm not quite sure how to unpack all of that yet, but it makes sense that if soul groups have come in with an agenda, they would move into a social structure that would give them the highest probability of achieving that agenda, whatever that agenda was, or those lessons were, such as creating a new domain of knowing, the idea of the United States of America, where the people rule, no longer a monarchy. And because, there is an innate common sense in humanity. It's always been there. Abraham Lincoln always acknowledged the common sense of the people. And so have others throughout. Even Buddha talked about, the wisdom already in the people. They just had to allow it to shine, to come out, to express itself. So it's always been there. Jesus, these things I do, ye shall do greater if ye have faith. So he's saying that we have the power to change the world, to change our circumstances. We always have. It's just how do you open a window in a mind that's closed?
Well, interessante essa expressão que o Alex usa, novos domínios de conhecimento, ou seja, novas sabedorias de quem já viveu situações e ou dificuldades similares e já conseguiram superar elas. Então, fica mais fácil enxergar a luz no fim do túnel para quem não está conseguindo enxergar a solução. E é justamente isso que é explicado nessa próxima parte. Vamos ver.
I think a lot of this culmination of things and changes, and Michael, this next part is the A's perspective, which is what I'm going to share. When Solar Warden went out into space, and Safari, the CIA dark space program, when they went out into space, and even the corporate groups, that the 20 and back and 30 and back and 10 and back that Tony Rodriguez talks about, those are corporate components of this whole thing. Some are benign. They're neither left or right or black or white. They're just in it for profit. But when they went out, they did things. They broke ethics, codes, things that we would consider normal here. Out there, it's not. When the pushback finally came, and they, by alliance groups, benevolent groups, pushing back and saying, look, you cannot do those things out here. It is never going to be tolerated. And they began to push us back, you know, into our solar system, and then push us back as close to our planet as possible. They're they began the process of a relationship, of mentoring to those who would listen. And there were primarily on the solar warden side, many of the naval officers, the admirals manning those boats, those ships. They listened. They wanted to know. They were curious. Okay, they weren't shut down. They were still very much open, um, to wanting to listening to information. And that process began of the mentoring with them, explaining how it works out here, explaining that, what it takes for a civilization to actually become part of the whole. And even though we had this technology on a consciousness level, we were not thinking as part of the whole. We were still very stuck in individualization and what's in it for us. Mining other planets and then moving on. Because, we've watched what the dark side does. That's what we've known for a very long time, just that part of it. So when we went out there and they were able to meet a different group with a completely different frequency and perspective, um, it changed everything. And because it's a higher frequency, Michael, that higher frequency always rises to the top. And as it began to permeate through the consciousness of our guys on Solar Warden, and and the conversations between the Solar Warden and the corporate interests that were out there, as that information began to be shared, there was a serious change in perspective. They began to realize that, wow, we could do a whole lot more and experience a whole lot more and expand our horizons if we just approach this from a completely different place within ourselves. Because, wisdom is wisdom, and when the mind is open and the heart is open, it will experience and it will know that wisdom. And I think because we all are still attached to higher self, to source, we will naturally gravitate to that, to the wisdom, to the higher frequency, to the higher knowledge. Because there's a part of us that stirs, Michael. We came from source. When we hear that frequency, when we hear that information, when we experience that knowledge, our souls begin to stir, because we, on some level, we remember that place, that being with all that is. We remember that. And we want to be drawn back to that, or to know more about it. Because, when we fell out of that space of oneness into time and into deeper and more slower vibrations and physicality, it's easy to forget our origin. It's very easy to forget the origin. But it's never fully gone. The soul always remembers. And I'm sure that's exactly what happened. And I'm sure that the alliance people presented their best communicators to us, to our humanity, and presented their position in a way that it absolutely not only resonated, but it turned on that spiritual component in the men and women um, in Solar Warden. And that has already begun to filter down into humanity at this point. And it's no mistake that they picked JP because he's like that. JP is every bit like that. And so are probably the men and women that he serves with and the other teams that are out there doing similar things, not only here in the States, but in other countries. They resonate to that frequency. And when JP talks, that genuineness always comes through, you know, and he doesn't try to be anything that he's not. He's just himself. And that's awesome. That's a spectacular quality to have. And
Achei muito inspirador essa parte que ele traz sobre as vivências nos programas espaciais secretos, que no início eram todos negativos ou apenas do tipo serviço a si mesmo. Mas, com o tempo, as alianças de ETs positivos foram mostrando, principalmente ao programa Solar Warden, que existem outras perspectivas, perspectivas de serviço aos outros e que, ao médio e longo prazo, são até mais vantajosas que as agendas negativas. Essa nova cultura positiva de serviço aos outros foi permeando os programas secretos com o tempo, e muito devido a isso vimos surgir a tão dita Aliança da Terra. Foi esse pessoal que convocou Trump a assumir um grande papel em toda essa fase de despertar da Terra. Vamos ver mais detalhes.
And I think that this is, to me, this was, Trump's genius was that, or why they picked Trump was that he was that catalyst for a lot of people to wake up to this bigger picture of, that, well, it's not just about fighting terrorists in Afghanistan that the deep state wanted us to do that war. He was talking about Space Force, and he was talking about
right,
new technologies that would usher in this incredible new world. In his inauguration speech of 2017, he's talking about these new technologies that will usher in this incredible, fabulous world. And it's like, well, where did he get that from? Well, it was obvious he got it from his uncle, John Trump, Professor John Trump, who was the guy that evaluated Nikola Tesla's inventions. And John Trump, he was plugged into the secret space program, the beginning of it during the Second World War. He was there at MIT, so he was
right.
Professor John Trump was a part of all of that. So here in the 1980s, he tells his nephew Donald Trump all about this stuff, and so Donald Trump, he's he's tapped on the shoulder by these generals. And I think they didn't just choose him because he was a billionaire and he was a rough ass and he had his own connections. He could fight, he could be a street brawler in these political situations. I think they chose him because he knew about the advanced technologies, the free energy systems. He knew about the secret space programs. And and he's talking about the creation of Space Force in 2017 and 18, and he sets it up in 2019. And I think that's where the big shift came in, was like, okay, now people start thinking about space, start thinking about what's out there.
John Trump probably knew all about those programs because one of the first places they would have gone with some of that tech would have been to MIT because that's where the biggest and the brightest minds were at the time. They would have gone there, and they would have looked at all this or cataloged all this information. And then once they tried to figure out what it was, they would probably, MIT would be in a position to recommend a contractor who they should give this to reverse engineer it. Or it could be that MIT began the process of reverse engineering. And the fact that that's probably still a secret is not surprising because they're still doing it. All right. They have their own programs as well. They always have. And John Trump was there for that as well. So, and I think it's a mistake to assume that Donald Trump didn't know about all that, because he's a brilliant person and he can retain an incredible amount of information. But I also think that he's met them. He's met off-worlders. I'm absolutely positive of that. So, we've heard of Johnny Appleseed. Well, he's Donald Appleseed. He drops seeds everywhere, crumbs, and in his own way, in his own fashion. And many people look at his bravado and say, oh my God, that's just outlandish. But, he dropped seeds everywhere, everywhere about what is, what could be, how expansive our planet really is, and what it is that we're actually capable of, without coming right out and saying it, because we do have that. We are out there. We have explored other solar systems. We did create something in the Altar system, and on other planets and moons here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've done all this.
Incrível como tudo está interligado, não é mesmo? As tecnologias exóticas estão intrinsecamente ligadas com a libertação do planeta Terra, pois são através dos recursos materiais ou recursos físicos do planeta que os trevosos sempre nos dominaram. E ao mesmo tempo, esse avanço de consciência sobre a fisicalidade não se dá se não houver o avanço no espiritual. Nesse ponto, as energias exógenas tiveram um grande papel para nos ajudar também. Vamos ver a explicação do Alex.
These changes in frequency. Now, you talked about the photon belt and the galactic. Well, you didn't say galactic plane, but we talk about the galactic plane, the plasma field that we're passing through and will be for thousands of years, and the energies coming from the different stars and the central star just in our own galaxy. That's energy. Okay, that's energy. And it's a higher energy. But we, on some level, Michael, we all recognize that because we came from source. We recognize those higher energies, even though many people are not sure what it is. They'll contribute it to God, the Holy Spirit, to Great Spirit, to Buddha, to Allah, whatever that label everyone gives to it. There is a sense of recognition of that frequency, because we are that frequency. We were created by that same frequency. And there's a recognition, even though we have layers of programming on top of it, our soul recognizes that frequency, which is what begins the stirring, the longing, the questions, the wanting to reach out. And, there's something profoundly familiar about this. And I don't know how to put it into words, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to feel it. I'm just going to put myself in its presence and trust. And that's people opening up the window. And once that window's open, those energies will continue to come in. And what it does is it expands our soul from the inside out. And that's what's changing people. It's not from the outside in. It's always everything, all the questions to our answers have always been on the inside. And of course, that's the last place we look. Mm-hmm. And of course, with all the programming that we've had, all the programming says, oh, it's this religion, it's that religion. it's this spokesperson, it's this government, it's this social structure. That's God. You know, we choose. We're telling you what God is. And of course, that's all a control and manipulation. And the genie's out of the bottle now, especially on this planet. The genie's totally out of the bottle. The dark side is never going to put the genie back in the bottle, and they know it. And they also know that their demise is absolute. And when I say demise, they're leaving. As a soul, they're leaving this planet. Okay. They're done. It's over. That frequency is going away. And unless they open that window within themselves, which I don't think a lot of them are capable of doing, then they're going to have to just leave, because the frequency is rising, and it's going to be so high that we're taking a physical planet and we're jumping realms. That's profound. That's absolutely profound.
Tudo está conectado. Na primeira fase, foi necessária a exposição do estado profundo, para assim aumentar o nível de consciência da população. Em seguida, teremos a retirada daqueles que se recusam a sintonizar nas novas frequências que o planeta está entrando. Mas essa parte detalharemos no próximo vídeo. A queda do Deep State. É isso por enquanto, pessoal. Continuemos na luta, sempre fazendo a nossa parte. Com relação a esse vídeo de hoje, foi bem desafiador de fazer. Quem puder contribuir com o canal, agradecemos imensamente. Saudações a todos!